Steel crashed against steel in the crowded NATO mess hall. The metallic tray hit concrete with a sound that cut through 300 conversations at once. Scrambled eggs scattered, coffee pooled. Bacon strips slid across the floor like tiny fallen soldiers. Over 300 military personnel from 20 nations turned their heads in unison. Raven Carter dropped to her knees. Her small hands moved quickly, gathering soggy toast and ruined breakfast items. Black hair fell forward, curtaining her face from view. She kept her eyes down, focused on the mess spreading across the polished floor. "Look at this." The voice carried easily through the sudden quiet. Lieutenant Mason Drake stepped away from his table boots, heavy on the ground. 6 feet 2 inches of SEAL confidence. 220 pounds of muscle wrapped in tactical gear. His sleeve tattoos caught the fluorescent light as he gestured toward the kneeling woman. 2 figures followed him. Captain Charlotte Hayes from British SAS, red hair, pulled back in a perfect bun, and Lieutenant Ethan Cole, Force Recon, with the kind of jaw that belonged on recruiting posters. 3 weeks, and she still can't carry a tray. Raven didn't look up. She continued collecting debris with methodical precision. Her fingers moved fast, too fast, like she was defusing an explosive device rather than cleaning spilled food. The pattern was efficient, almost tactical. "You deaf sweetheart!" Mason planted himself directly in her path as she tried to stand. The tray wobbled in her grip. 6'2" versus 5'4". Elite operator with 12 years of experience versus a cafeteria worker in her 30s. The math was simple. Everyone could see it. Raven stepped left. Mason mirrored her movement. She shifted right. He blocked that angle too. 3 times this dance repeated. She never spoke. Just stood there clutching the empty tray against her chest like a shield, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. Maybe civilians shouldn't work on military bases. Charlotte's British accent sliced through the tension with surgical precision. Her arms crossed fingers, tapping against pressed uniform sleeves. Intelligence officer. Always analyzing, always finding weaknesses. Especially weak ones. Ethan laughed a short, sharp bark of amusement. Bet she's never even held a rifle. Around the mess hall, conversations had stopped completely. Some people watched openly. Others pretended not to notice while tracking every movement from their peripheral vision. A few pulled out phones recording angles, suddenly very interesting. Private Lily Morgan adjusted her position near the coffee station camera app, already active. Nobody noticed the small details. The way Raven's shoulders, despite her lowered head, weren't hunched in defeat. They were square, level, tense with controlled precision. The way her weight distributed evenly across both feet wasn't the stance of someone cowering. It was balanced, grounded, ready. The way she held that tray, hands positioned at exact angles for maximum structural support, wasn't self-taught. It was drilled. Practiced until muscle memory made it automatic. Nobody saw these things. Not yet. What they would discover in the next 24 hours would change everything. The morning sun through the mess hall windows caught the edge of her collar. For just a moment, a shadow was visible beneath the fabric on her right shoulder. Dark lines, possibly ink. But the angle shifted, and it vanished hidden again beneath carefully chosen clothing. Mason stepped closer, invading personal space with casual dominance. "You gonna say something, or just stand there looking pathetic?" Raven's voice came out quiet, almost inaudible. "Excuse me, sir. I need to get cleaning supplies." She tried to step around him. He shifted again, blocking her path with his body mass. His buddies chuckled behind him. Charlotte's smile was cold and sharp. Ethan shook his head like he was watching something disappointing. The thing was, none of them saw what Sergeant First Class Logan Pierce saw from 3 tables away. Logan was 42, 23 years in the Army, 3 combat deployments, enough time and grade to recognize things younger soldiers missed. He saw the micro-adjustment in Raven's stance when Mason got too close. Saw the way her left foot angled slightly back, creating a stable base. Saw her center of gravity lower by maybe an inch. Saw a defensive posture that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with training. Logan said nothing, just watched and wondered. Hold on, because what happens next isn't what you think. That moment in the mess hall. Just the beginning. See, there's a reason Raven never fights back. A reason she keeps her head down. And it has nothing to do with fear. Over the next 15 minutes, you'll see exactly what I mean. But first, you need to understand something about the people mocking her. They're not random soldiers. Each one represents the absolute best their country has to offer, and they're about to learn why silence isn't always weakness. Stay with me. Colonel Henry Walsh observed from the elevated officers' dining section, coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. The training commander for this NATO facility had 30 years of service, a chest full of medals, and zero patience for drama in his mess hall. But he also had zero patience for civilians who couldn't handle the pressure of military environments. His expression made his opinion clear. If you can't take it, don't work here. Mason finally stepped aside, giving Raven just enough room to pass. She moved quickly toward the supply closet, head still down, tray clutched tight. The crowd slowly returned to their meals, conversations resuming with that peculiar energy that follows unexpected entertainment. Pathetic, Charlotte murmured to Mason as they returned to their table. How did she even get hired? Diversity quota, probably. Ethan replied, loading his fork with eggs. Base needs to show they employ locals or something. Nobody mentioned it again. Just another morning incident, meaningless, except it wasn't. In the supply closet, Raven set the tray down with absolute precision. Not dropped, not tossed. Placed with deliberate care at a 90-degree angle to the shelf edge handle aligned with the corner. She retrieved cleaning supplies from their designated locations without hesitation, without searching, without the fumbling of someone unfamiliar with inventory. Her hands were steady now. No trembling, no fear. She turned toward the door, supplies in hand, and for just a moment, her reflection caught in the metal cabinet surface. The woman who looked back wasn't scared, wasn't weak. She looked tired. That was different. By the time Raven returned to the mess hall, the spill area had been cordoned off with a small warning sign. She cleaned methodically, precisely using efficient motions that wasted zero energy. The pattern was specific: secure the perimeter work, from outside to center. Eliminate contamination, sterilize, confirm clearance. It was the same pattern used for cleaning up after IED strikes. Nobody noticed. They were all eating breakfast. The rest of the morning passed without incident. Raven worked the serving line during lunch rush, distributing meals with quiet efficiency. She didn't make eye contact, didn't engage in conversation beyond necessary acknowledgments. Soldiers moved through with trays most, ignoring her completely. Some offering polite thanks, a few Mason's friends making small comments just loud enough to be heard. Careful with that. Ladle wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. Think she can count portions, or is that too complicated? Raven's expression never changed. Neutral, calm, absent. Corporal Connor Reed noticed, though. The 24-year-old Army medic had been deployed twice, seen enough human behavior to recognize patterns. When Raven handed him his meal tray, he saw her hands. The calluses were wrong, not the soft, rounded buildup from repetitive kitchen work. These were hard, specific formations. Knuckles, palm edges, the kind that came from striking surfaces repeatedly. Combat sports, maybe, but the distribution pattern suggested something more comprehensive. "Thank you," Connor said, making eye contact deliberately. Raven's eyes flicked up for half a second, dark brown, clear, sharp with intelligence, then back down. "You're welcome." Her voice was steady, no accent, general American English, could be from anywhere. Connor moved along, but the image of those hands stayed with him. Wrong profession for those calluses, wrong entirely. The afternoon brought equipment deliveries to the training wing. Raven loaded supply carts with requisitioned items, ammunition crates, tactical gear, training materials. The armory supply room smelled like gun oil and canvas. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Metal shelves stretched 12 feet high, organized with military precision. She was alone when the door opened hard, slamming against its stop. Master Sergeant Iris Bennett stepped inside. U.S. Army Special Forces. 5'9", athletic build, close-cropped blonde hair, and an expression of permanent skepticism. Iris had fought tooth and nail for recognition in a male-dominated field, earned her Green Beret through sheer determination, and had exactly zero tolerance for women who didn't measure up to her standards. Seeing a small, quiet civilian woman handling military equipment triggered something visceral. "You're the new supply clerk." Statement, not question. Iris circled the cart, examining Raven's work. "Those ammunition crates, 80 pounds each. How'd you load them?" Raven kept her eyes on the inventory sheet. "With the hand truck, Master Sergeant." "Show me." It wasn't a request. Iris pointed to an unopened crate near the back wall. Standardized military packaging. 85 pounds of 5.56mm rounds. The crate sat on the floor waiting for inventory processing. Raven set down her clipboard, walked to the crate, assessed it for 2 seconds. Then she bent her knees. Not her back gripped the handholds with proper technique, engaged her core, and lifted. Smooth, controlled. She carried it 15 feet to the cart and set it down without dropping it, without struggling, without any indication that 85 pounds was particularly challenging. The movement pattern was textbook. Military standard load-bearing technique taught in basic training. Weight distribution through legs and core. Back straight. Controlled breathing. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. Iris's eyes narrowed. "Where'd you learn that?" "My dad was Army Reese," Raven replied, still not making eye contact. "He taught me how to lift properly when I was young. Plausible, verifiable if checked probably. But something about the delivery was too smooth, too prepared, like an answer rehearsed for exactly this question." "Uh-huh." Iris didn't move. "What did your dad do?" "What was his MOS?" "Infantry, 11 Bravo." Raven picked up her clipboard again, checking off items. "He retired as a sergeant first class." Also plausible. 11 Bravo was the most common infantry designation. Hard to challenge. Could describe 50,000 soldiers. Iris stepped closer. "Where'd he serve?" "Fort Benning. Later Fort Campbell. Deployed to Iraq twice in the early 2000s. Raven's voice remained flat. Factual. "Is there anything else you need?" "Master Sergeant, I have 3 more deliveries scheduled." "You're very calm for someone being interrogated." "I'm not being interrogated. You're asking about my father." Finally, Raven looked up, made eye contact, held it. "He died 6 years ago. Lung cancer from burn pit exposure. I don't particularly enjoy talking about him with strangers, but I understand the questions. This is a secure facility. You need to know who's handling equipment. I have clearance, I pass background checks, I do my job quietly and go home. That's all." The eye contact lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Raven looked back at her clipboard, ending the interaction on her terms. Iris felt something shift in her perception. The submission wasn't real. This woman was choosing not to engage, which was fundamentally different from being unable to engage. The distinction was subtle, but significant. "Fine," Iris said finally. "But I'll be watching you." "Understood, Master Sergeant." Iris left. The door closed. Raven stood motionless for 30 seconds. Breathing controlled, then continued her work like nothing had happened. But her hands were shaking now, barely visible, tremors in her fingers as she marked the inventory sheet. Memory was a weapon that cut both ways. Evening brought rotation changes. New personnel arrived for the joint training exercise. 20 NATO member nations participating in a 2-week combat readiness assessment. The mess hall swelled to capacity during dinner service. Over 400 personnel, multiple languages, various uniforms, all trying to navigate the buffet line while maintaining military courtesy. Raven worked the beverage station. Coffee, tea, juice, water. Simple tasks, repetitive, safe. She watched faces pass by. Evaluated threats automatically unconsciously. North corner exit 12 feet. South exit 28 feet. Fire suppression system overhead. Kitchen access behind her. Windows facing east. 17 potential defensive positions within 30-foot radius. Her therapist had worked with her for months to stop doing this. The constant tactical assessment, the automatic threat evaluation, the inability to exist in a space without planning for violence. She was supposed to be getting better. That's why she'd taken this job. Exposure therapy. Exist in a military environment without being military. Prove to herself that she could be around this world without being consumed by it. Some days it worked. Today wasn't one of those days. "You all right?" The voice was gentle. Sergeant Liam Foster stood in front of her, empty cup in hand. 38 years old, Army medic for 16 years. Kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. He was also observant in ways most people weren't. Raven blinked, refocusing. "Sorry, coffee or tea?" "Coffee black." Liam watched her pour, watched her hands specifically. "Those are interesting scars." Her sleeves were long, but the left one had ridden up slightly during the pouring motion. just enough to reveal two pale lines on her inner forearm, straight, parallel. Not self-inflicted, too clean, too precise, surgical maybe, or shrapnel entry points that had been repaired by a skilled trauma surgeon. Liam had seen plenty of both. These looked like the latter. Raven tugged her sleeve down immediately. Kitchen accident years ago. Broken glass. Must have been quite a lot of glass. His tone wasn't accusatory, just noting facts. Those looked like they required surgical intervention. Pretty good work, too. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. Military hospital in Germany, Raven said quietly. My father's benefits covered it when I was visiting him during a deployment. Another prepared answer, another plausible explanation. But Liam was a medic. He understood wound patterns. Those scars weren't from glass. They were consistent with fragmentation injuries, the kind caused by explosive devices, sending metal fragments through soft tissue at high velocity. The surgical repair pattern matched field hospital work in active combat zones. He'd seen identical scarring on operators returning from Kandahar province. Liam took his coffee without comment. Thank you. You're welcome. He walked away slowly, mind, working through possibilities. The pieces didn't fit. Something about Raven Carter didn't match her story, but he couldn't identify exactly what, not yet. By 1900 hours, 7 p.m. in civilian time, the mess hall had mostly cleared. Raven cleaned tables with the same methodical efficiency she applied to everything. Spray, wipe, inspect, repeat. Her movements created predictable patterns, which is why she immediately noticed when someone broke the pattern. Lieutenant Grace Sullivan approached from her left side instead of the main aisle. 26 years old Air Force intelligence analyst, sharp as a tack and twice as precise. Grace carried a tablet displaying requisition forms. Excuse me, do you handle supply orders? Grace asked. Raven straightened. For mess hall supplies, yes. For other departments, you'll need to go through the main supply office. This is for the mess hall. Additional dry goods for the extended training period. The quantities seem wrong, though. Can you look at this? Grace held out the tablet. Raven took it, scanning the document. Her eyes moved quickly across the data. Too quickly. She was reading faster than someone with basic supply, clerk training, should read military requisition formats. This is formatted wrong, Raven said after 15 seconds. Your quantities are listed by weight instead of units. For military supply chain, you need to specify count and weight. Also, your delivery timeline doesn't account for secure transport requirements. Items moving on to base need 48 to 72-hour clearance, depending on vendor security classification. Grace's eyebrows rose. How do you know that? Raven caught herself. I read the supply manual when I was hired, very thoroughly. Nobody reads those manuals that thoroughly. They're 400 pages of bureaucratic nightmares. Grace smiled, not unkind. You sound like you've done logistics before. Real logistics, not just kitchen supplies. I'm detail-oriented. Raven handed back the tablet. I'll correct the format and resubmit. You should have approval within 72 hours. Thank you. That's actually really helpful. Grace hesitated. You know we could use someone with your attention to detail in supply chain operations. Have you ever thought about applying for a different position on base? I'm comfortable where I am, Raven said simply, but I appreciate the offer. Grace nodded and left, but Raven saw her glance back twice with an expression of puzzlement. Another person filing away inconsistencies. Another potential problem. This was getting complicated. The following morning started earlier than usual. 05:35:30 a.m. found Raven in the storage facility, conducting inventory checks before the breakfast rush. The large warehouse space was mostly empty this early, just her and rows of shelving units holding supplies for the entire base operation. She was counting canned goods when she heard boots on concrete. Captain Blake Anderson rounded the corner, carrying coffee in a travel mug. U.S. Army Rangers, 40 years old, one of the few senior officers who seemed immune to bullshit politics. He had a reputation for being fair-minded and observant. He also had a reputation for not suffering fools. Early start. Blake commented, not quite a question. Inventory doesn't count itself, sir. Raven continued her clipboard notations. No, I suppose it doesn't. Blake sipped his coffee, watching her work. You were the one who had trouble with Lieutenant Drake yesterday. It wasn't trouble, just a misunderstanding. Drake's a good operator, but he can be an ass sometimes. Don't take it personally. I don't take anything personally, sir. Blake studied her for a long moment. You prior service. Raven's hand froze for half a second on the clipboard, barely noticeable. No, sir. You sure because you've got the bearing, the way you stand, the way you respond to rank, the automatic sir without being told. Most civilians don't do that naturally. My father was Army, Raven said, falling back on her prepared explanation. I grew up around military culture. What was his unit? 101st Airborne. Blake nodded slowly. Good division, Screaming Eagles, they produce solid soldiers. He paused. But they don't usually produce daughters who count inventory with tactical efficiency. Raven looked up at that. Sir, your counting pattern, you're working in a grid, sections and quadrants, standard warehouse management technique, sure, but the specific pattern you're using matches military supply chain methodology, the kind they teach at logistics courses in Fort Lee. Blake's expression wasn't hostile, just curious. Interesting skill set for a cafeteria worker. I'm thorough. Yeah, I'm noticing that. Blake took another sip of coffee. Here's the thing. I don't care what people's backgrounds are, as long as they do their jobs and don't cause problems. You do your job. You don't cause problems. So, whatever your story is, it's your business. But if Drake or his buddies keep harassing you, tell me. There's a difference between military culture and bullying. We allow the first. We don't tolerate the second. Thank you, sir. I can handle it. I believe you probably can. Blake turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, your secret, whatever it is, you're not hiding it as well as you think. People are starting to notice things don't add up. Might want to be more careful. He walked away, leaving Raven alone with her inventory and her racing thoughts. Blake was right. She was slipping, making mistakes, showing skills she shouldn't have. The whole point of being here was to disappear into normalcy, but apparently she'd forgotten how normal people behaved, forgotten what incompetence looked like. 5 years of hiding your identity, and it only took 3 weeks for cracks to show. She needed to be more careful. Speaking of advanced technology, the training equipment at NATO facilities represents some of the most sophisticated gear in the world. Modern combat simulation systems can cost upwards of $15,000 per unit, utilizing haptic feedback and AI-driven scenario generation. These aren't your average video game setups. They are medical-grade precision tools that can monitor heart rate variability, stress responses, and decision-making patterns under pressure. The same technology that saves lives in field hospitals is now being used to train the next generation of operators. It's the kind of investment that separates elite forces from everyone else. The morning training session brought new problems. The outdoor range was active with qualification drills for the NATO exercise participants. Raven's duties required delivering water coolers to the observation area, where senior officers monitored their personnel's performance. Mason was there, Charlotte too, along with Ethan and about 40 other operators from various nations. The demonstration involved weapons assembly, speed drills, a competitive event, where operators raced to field strip and reassemble their service weapons while blindfolded. Raven tried to slip in, quietly position the water coolers, and leave. She should have known better. "Hey, sweetheart," Mason called out loudly. "Come watch how real professionals work." The entire observation deck turned to look. 60 pairs of eyes, some amused, some annoyed at the interruption. Most just curious about what would happen next. Raven set down the water cooler. "I need to return to the mess hall, sir." "Oh, come on. Don't you want to see what actual military competence looks like?" Mason's grin was predatory. His SEAL buddies chuckled. "Bet you've never seen this kind of skill before." Charlotte joined in her accent, making the mockery sound almost polite. "Mason's right. This is educational. You might learn something." "Unless she's scared of guns," Ethan added. "Some people can't handle them, get all nervous and shaky." Raven stood very still. Inside, old instincts screamed warnings. Threatened animals, retreat or attack. She was choosing option 3, freeze and wait for the threat to lose interest. But Mason wasn't losing interest. "Tell you what, after we finish this drill, maybe you can try holding one. See if you can manage not to drop it." Laughter rippled through the crowd, not malicious from most of them. Just people enjoying entertainment at someone else's expense. standard military humor. Raven's jaw tightened. That won't be necessary. Aw, she's getting defensive? Mason stepped closer. What's wrong? Scared you'll embarrass yourself. Blake's voice cut through from the back of the observation deck. Drake, knock it off. She's working. Just having fun, sir. No harm in a little education for our civilian support staff. Find a different way to have fun. The moment deflated. Mason backed off with an exaggerated shrug, returning to his position for the drill. Raven used the opportunity to leave quickly, heart-pounding hands shaking again. This was getting worse. The more they pushed, the harder it became to maintain control. She needed to stay calm, stay hidden, stay small. But something inside her, something military and trained and disciplined, hated every second of the submission. Wanted to show them exactly how wrong they were. Wanted to demonstrate 15 years of expertise they couldn't imagine. She crushed that impulse down hard. That person was dead. Had to stay dead. The weapon assembly drill continued without her. Mason won his heat easily reassembling his M4 in 42 seconds while blindfolded. Respectable time, professional level. He celebrated with fist bumps and cocky grins. Nobody noticed Raven watching from the distant supply window. Nobody saw her lips moving slightly, counting steps, identifying mistakes in his technique. Nobody heard her whisper, 37 seconds, under her breath, the time she could beat him by, even now, even after years away from active duty. Nobody saw any of it. She made sure of that. Lunch service was busier than usual. The joint exercise had officially begun, bringing increased activity levels across the base. Raven worked her station with mechanical efficiency, serving food, wiping counters, refilling supplies. The rhythm was soothing in its monotony until Colonel Walsh appeared at her station. "Carter, correct." His voice carried command weight. Officers' voices always did. Raven's response was automatic spine, straightening shoulders, back, feet, positioned shoulder width apart. Parade rest without the hand positioning. "Yes, sir." Walsh noticed. Of course he noticed. He was a 30-year infantry officer. He could spot military bearing from 100 yards. "I'm conducting facility inspections this week. Supply areas need to meet NATO standards for the exercise. I'll need access to the warehouse storage tomorrow at 0700. His eyes tracked her posture. "Do you understand those instructions?" "Yes, sir." 0700. "I'll ensure the facility is ready for inspection." 0700. Walsh repeated slowly. That's interesting phrasing. Raven realized her mistake immediately. Civilians didn't use military time naturally. They translated it. 0700 was fine. 0700 marked you as someone who thought in military time format automatically. "Sorry, sir, I meant 7 a.m. I hear so much military time here, sometimes I slip into using it." Walsh's expression suggested he didn't believe her. "Uh-huh. Tell me, Carter, why does someone with your evident organizational skills work in a cafeteria? You clearly have capacity for more complex tasks." "I prefer simple work, sir. It's calming." "Calming?" He let the word hang there. "What do you need calming from?" The question was more perceptive than it seemed. Raven chose her next words carefully. "Life can be stressful, sir. Working here is peaceful, predictable. I appreciate that. You're prior service, aren't you?" It wasn't a question, it was a statement, direct and certain. Raven held his gaze. "No, sir." "Then you're lying about something else." Walsh didn't blink. "I don't know what it is yet, but I will find out. This facility operates on trust and security. If you're hiding something that poses a risk, it's my job to identify that risk." "Understood." "There's nothing to identify, sir. I'm just trying to do my job." "We'll see." Walsh moved along the line, but his attention lingered. Another person filing away suspicions. Another potential problem growing larger. The afternoon brought mandatory briefings for all NATO personnel. Raven wasn't required to attend, but the mess hall needed to prepare refreshments for the 70 attendees. She loaded service carts with coffee tea water bottles and snack items, rolling them down to the briefing room on the facility's second floor. The room was impressive stadium seating, large projection screen, tactical maps covering 3 walls. Flags from 20 nations hung from ceiling mounts. Senior officers from multiple countries occupied the front rows. Lower-ranking personnel filled in behind. Raven set up the refreshment table in the back corner, quietly. She was arranging coffee cups when the briefing began. The presenter, a German army major, pulled up operational maps of Kandahar province, training scenarios based on real-world conflict zones, terrain analysis, enemy movement patterns, historical engagement data. Raven's hands froze on a coffee cup. That map. She knew that map. Knew it better than her own reflection. Had memorized every ridgeline, every compound, every road and trail and hidden approach. Sector 7, north of Kandahar City. The valley where Operation Vanguard Night had gone from routine to catastrophic in under 6 minutes, where her entire team had died. The cup slipped. She caught it before it fell, but the motion drew attention. Several people in the back rows glanced over. She forced herself to keep moving, keep working, keep pretending this was just another day doing just another task. But her eyes kept returning to that map, to the red circle marking what the presenter called Area of Interest Delta. That was the wrong designation. That was the ridgeline, the killing ground, the place where blood had soaked into sand and changed everything. The tactical advantage of elevated positions cannot be overstated, the German major was saying. In this historical engagement from 2019, a small unit held this ridge. He pointed directly at the spot against overwhelming enemy numbers for over 40 minutes. The defensive action allowed for extraction of wounded personnel and prevented enemy advancement into the valley floor. It remains a textbook example of force multiplication through superior positioning. Raven's breathing had become shallow, fast. She could smell dust and cordite and blood, could hear radio chatter and gunfire and someone screaming for a medic, could remember exactly how it felt to be the only one still breathing. "You okay?" The whisper came from her right. Captain Ivy Reynolds, U.S. Navy, sat at the end of the back row. She'd noticed Raven's distress. "You look pale." "I'm fine," Raven whispered back. "You've been there, haven't you?" Ivy wasn't asking. "Kandahar, you recognize that sector?" "I don't know what you mean." "Your hands are shaking. Your breathing changed when that map came up, and you're staring at that ridge like you've seen it before, not in photos, in person." Ivy's voice was gentle but certain. "How long were you deployed?" Raven picked up the coffee pot, using work as an excuse to move away. "I've never been deployed, ma'am. I'm a civilian." She left the briefing room, quickly abandoning the remaining setup tasks. Let someone else finish. She needed air, space, distance from that map and those memories and the visceral certainty that she'd never really left that ridge at all. Outside in the hallway, she leaned against the wall, forcing breath control. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out, hold for 4. Standard tactical breathing for stress management, another thing she shouldn't know how to do. The pattern worked. Her heartbeat slowed. The flashback faded. Present reality reasserted itself. She was safe. She was in Virginia. She was anonymous, except she wasn't. Not anymore. Too many people were asking questions, making observations, filing away inconsistencies. Blake knew something was wrong. Walsh suspected hidden history. Liam had identified combat-consistent scarring. Ivy had caught her PTSD response to the Kandahar map. Even Grace had noticed expertise that didn't match her cover story. The facade was crumbling, and she had no idea how to stop it, right there. Did you catch that? The way she handled that rifle that wasn't beginner's luck? And the people watching, they're starting to notice too. But here's where it gets interesting. Nobody's putting the pieces together yet. They see the skills, but they don't see the picture. That's about to change. Keep watching. Evening brought another incident. Inevitable, really, given how the day had been going. The outdoor obstacle course was open for recreational use after duty hours. Many NATO participants used the facilities to maintain fitness and blow off steam from the intensive training schedule. Raven was delivering equipment supplies to the adjacent storage building when she heard the commotion. A crowd had gathered at the course entrance, 50 or 60 people, phones out. That particular energy that meant something entertaining was happening. She tried to walk past, tried to stay invisible. "There she is," Charlotte's voice rang out. Perfect timing. Raven kept walking, faster now. "Carter, stop." That was Walsh's command voice, Colonel giving an order. She stopped, no choice. The crowd parted as she turned around. In the center stood Charlotte, Mason, Ethan, and Iris. Behind them, Walsh observed with crossed arms. Lily had her phone camera ready. Connor watched with concern. Blake stood off to one side, expression unreadable. Charlotte smiled with predatory delight. We were just discussing physical fitness standards, how they're core to military effectiveness, and how everyone on this base, civilian or not, should meet minimum competency levels. I'm not military, Raven said flatly. No, you're not. But you work here. You interact with operational personnel. You handle sensitive equipment. Charlotte gestured to the obstacle course. So, here's the thing. Let's see if you can finish this course. Standard time limit 10 minutes. If you can't do it, maybe you shouldn't be working in this environment. Mason grinned. Yeah, call it quality assurance. This is harassment, Blake interjected. Colonel, this is inappropriate. Walsh considered. Is it? The course is open. Carter can decline if she wants. Nobody's forcing her. His eyes met Raven's. Of course, declining would raise questions about why someone so opposed to demonstrating basic fitness is working on a military installation. The trap was perfect. Refuse and confirm their suspicions of deception. Accept and risk revealing too much. Raven looked at the course. Standard military design. Rope climb, wall vault, cargo, net, low crawl, section balance, beams, tire, run final sprint. She'd run similar courses hundreds of times, could complete this one in under 6 minutes even now, which meant she had to pretend she couldn't, had to make it look difficult, struggle appropriately, fail convincingly enough to seem genuine, but succeed just enough to avoid total humiliation. Fine, she said quietly. I'll try. The crowd's energy shifted, excitement, anticipation, phones raised. Lily moved to get better angles. Raven approached the starting line, removed her jacket, keeping her long-sleeve shirt on, hiding her arms, stretched minimally, made it look unpracticed. On your mark, Charlotte announced with theatrical flair. Go. Raven started slow, intentionally slow. She jogged to the rope climb and stared up at it like she'd never seen one before, gripped the rope awkwardly, began climbing with inefficient technique, all arms, no leg support, wasting energy. But muscle memory had other ideas. 10 feet up, her legs automatically wrapped the rope correctly. Her ascent speed increased. By the time she reached the top, the movement was textbook perfect. She caught herself, made the descent deliberately clumsy, dropped the last 3 feet instead of sliding down properly, the wall vault next, 12 feet high. She approached with obvious hesitation, jumped barely catching the top edge, struggled to pull herself up, made it look hard. But when she swung her leg over, the motion was too smooth, too practiced. The tactical entry technique too obvious to trained eyes. Sergeant Logan, watching from the crowd, narrowed his eyes. The cargo net should have been her worst section. Instead, her hands found purchase points automatically. Her body moved with efficient precision up and over. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Low crawl section. This was where she made her mistake. Proper low crawl technique requires specific body positioning to minimize profile exposure. Elbows and knees, weapon cradled head down. It's not intuitive, it's taught. Raven dropped into perfect combat patrol form without thinking, cleared the 30-meter section in 40 seconds. Multiple people in the crowd straightened. That wasn't amateur movement, that was training. Liam stepped forward, mouth opening to say something. Blake held up a hand, stopping him. They both just watched. Balance beam, tire run, final sprint. Raven made them look difficult, stumbled, recovered, pushed through. She crossed the finish line at 8 minutes 20 seconds, breathing hard, sweating, looking exhausted. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some applauded politely, others exchanged glances. Most were simply confused because what they had witnessed didn't match their expectations. Well, Charlotte said slowly, that was unexpected. She did better than 60% of active soldiers here, Ethan admitted reluctantly. Where did you learn to... I used to run track in high school, Raven interrupted, gasping, and my dad made me exercise growing up. That's all. That low crawl technique wasn't from track. Mason's voice had lost its mocking tone. That was military. I watched people practice here. I copied what I saw. Nobody learns combat patrol positioning by watching once. Iris stepped forward. You've done this before. Admit it. Raven straightened, recovering her breath faster than she should have. I haven't done anything. You challenged me, I accepted. I finished your course. Now I'm done. She walked away, ignoring the calls for her to stop and explain. Ignored the questions following her. Just kept walking until she was clear of the crowd and alone in the storage building. Once inside, she locked the door and slid down against the wall. Her hands were shaking violently now. Not from exertion, from stress, from the certainty that she just made everything worse. Outside, the crowd dispersed slowly, but conversations were happening, observations being shared, suspicions confirmed. Connor found Liam near the medical building 20 minutes later. "Doc, what did you see on that course?" Liam was quiet for a long moment. "I saw someone who's done hundreds of obstacle course runs, someone who had to actively remember to make mistakes, someone who's trying very hard to hide professional-level training. Should we report it? Report what that a civilian woman is more physically capable than we expected? That's not a crime?" Liam looked toward the direction Raven had gone. "But it is interesting. Those scars I saw on her arm earlier. They're consistent with fragmentation wounds, IED blast patterns, the kind treated in field hospitals in Kandahar province around 2019. Connor's eyes widened. "You think she was deployed?" "I think something happened to her that she desperately doesn't want anyone to know about." Liam pulled out his phone. "I'm going to check something. I treated a lot of operators in that region, task force personnel especially. Some of those wounds, they were distinctive." He scrolled through old photos on his device. Medical documentation from his deployment. Casualty images stored for reference and training. One particular set of images made him pause. A female operator. Multiple fragmentation wounds. Left forearm, right shoulder, abdomen. The shoulder wound had been severe deep tissue damage, required extensive reconstruction. The scars would have been significant. The file name, TFB, is 17. KIA. August 2019. Liam stared at the screen wheels turning. Then he looked up toward where Raven Carter had disappeared. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible. They said she was killed in action. The report was definitive. But impossible things happen sometimes, especially in the classified world of special operations." The next morning brought new complications. Lieutenant Commander Oliver Hayes, the facility's intelligence officer, sat in his office reviewing overnight security logs when a facial recognition alert appeared on his screen. Routine software, always running, cross-checking all base personnel against various databases. Usually nothing interesting appeared. Usually, today was different. The alert showed Raven Carter's employee photo matched 78% confidence with an image in a restricted military database. The matching image was heavily redacted, most identifying information blocked. But two details were visible: a task force designation, TFB, and a status code, KIA 2019. Oliver stared at his screen for a full minute, processing what he was seeing. Then he picked up his phone and started making calls, started pulling threads, started investigating. Because if this match was legitimate, if a woman declared killed in action 5 years ago was working in their mess hall, then something very serious was happening. Something above his clearance level, something that needed to be reported immediately. He just didn't know yet who to report it to, or what the consequences would be. The morning progressed with deceptive normalcy. Breakfast service, supply deliveries, routine tasks performed by routine people. Except nothing was routine anymore. Everything had shifted subtly, but irrevocably. Raven felt it, the weight of observation, multiple sets of eyes tracking her movements. She'd become interesting. Interesting was dangerous. She needed to disappear again, reset her cover, maybe request a transfer to a different facility entirely, start over somewhere nobody was asking questions. But it was too late for that, far too late. Because at noon during the height of lunch service, everything would change. The fragile equilibrium would shatter, and the identity she'd worked 5 years to bury would come screaming back to life, whether she wanted it to or not. The day was far from over, and the worst or the best, depending on perspective, was yet to come. Here's something most people don't know. Military personnel at this level often carry specialized insurance policies that go way beyond standard coverage. We're talking high-value disability protection, that can pay out up to $5 million for service-connected injuries. These policies are designed for high-risk professions and include coverage for things like loss of security clearance or PTSD-related career changes. Financial advisors who specialize in military clients understand that standard life insurance doesn't cut it when your job involves classified operations in hostile territories. It's protection planning at a completely different level. The emergency came at 12:47 p.m. The timing was almost poetic in its terrible precision. Lunch rush, maximum personnel, maximum witnesses. Private first class. Aiden Brooks, 21 years old, had been conducting a rifle qualification drill on Range 3 when his weapon experienced a catastrophic malfunction. The details would later be investigated. Faulty ammunition, maintenance error, user mistake. But in the moment, only the result mattered. Aiden's right shoulder had been dislocated violently by the recoil force, and he was lying on the ground in considerable pain. The range safety officer called for medical assistance. Standard protocol. But the base medical facility was dealing with a minor vehicle accident from the motor pool, and all available medics were tied up with that situation. Someone needed to stabilize Aiden until proper medical help arrived. Someone needed to assess injury severity and prevent further damage. The range safety officer looked around at the gathered crowd. Anyone have medical training? Silence. Most operators knew basic first aid, but a shoulder dislocation required more sophisticated knowledge. Risk of nerve damage, vascular compromise, secondary injuries. Nobody wanted to make it worse. Raven heard about it when Connor rushed through the mess hall grabbing his aid bag. "Medical emergency on the range," he called out. "Where's Doc Foster?" "He's with the motor pool situation," someone replied. "Won't be back for 30 minutes minimum." Connor swore quietly. "I'll go alone then. Shoulder dislocation, should be manageable." He ran out. The mess hall conversation resumed. Just another minor incident. Nothing unusual, except Raven knew shoulder dislocations could be extremely dangerous if handled incorrectly. Knew the time window for safe reduction. Knew the risks of delayed treatment. She also knew she should stay exactly where she was. Keep serving lunch, stay invisible. But old instincts ran deeper than rational thought. Deeper than self-preservation. Deeper than 5 years of hiding. She set down her serving ladle and followed Connor. Quietly. Nobody noticed her leave. The range was a quarter-mile away. She jogged, not ran. Didn't want to draw attention. Arrived at Range 3 to find a crowd of about 30 people surrounding Aiden, who was sitting up, but clearly in significant pain. His face was pale, sweat beading, right arm hanging wrong. Connor was already assessing. "Okay, buddy, I'm going to check for circulation first. Can you feel your fingers?" "Barely." Aiden gasped. "It's getting numb." Not good. Numbness meant potential nerve or vascular compromise. The injury needed reduction soon. Connor looked around. "I need someone to help me. This is going to require traction and manipulation. Doc Foster usually assists, but I can help." Raven's voice was quiet but clear. Everyone turned to look at her. The cafeteria worker, the civilian, the woman who'd been mocked repeatedly for being weak and incompetent. Connor's expression was confused. "Do you have medical training?" "Some." Raven moved forward. "Enough for this. This isn't a simple procedure. If we do it wrong..." Anterior shoulder dislocation, right side, approximately 15 minutes since injury occurred. Patient showing signs of distal neurovascular compromise. Reduction needs to happen within 30 minutes maximum to prevent permanent damage. Raven knelt beside Aiden, examining his shoulder with professional efficiency. "We're using the external rotation method, less painful than traction. Lower risk of complications. I'll talk him through it while you maintain stabilization." Connor stared at her. "How do you..." "I'll explain later. Right now we treat him." Raven's voice had changed. Calm, authoritative, precise. This wasn't a cafeteria worker speaking. This was someone else entirely. "Okay," Connor said slowly. "Tell me what you need." The next 3 minutes were clinical and expert. Raven guided Aiden into the correct position. Explained each step in calm, clear language that reduced his panic. Instructed Connor on proper stabilization techniques. Applied gentle rotational force at exactly the right angle with exactly the right timing. The shoulder reduced with an audible pop. Aiden gasped, then relaxed as pain levels dropped immediately. Oh, thank goodness, that's so much better. Raven immediately checked circulation nerve function range of motion. Radial pulse strong, sensation returning to fingers. Good capillary refill, no obvious vascular damage. You're going to need imaging to rule out fractures, but the reduction was successful. Connor was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. That was perfect. That was better than some doctors I've seen. Where did you... I volunteer at a civilian emergency clinic, Raven said, falling back on another prepared lie. Basic trauma response training. That wasn't basic. That was TCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care. The terminology, the technique, the confidence. Connor stood eyes locked on her. Nobody learns that at civilian clinics. The crowd around them had gone very quiet. 30 people watching, 30 people who'd just witnessed something that didn't match the narrative they'd been told. Liam arrived at that moment running from the direction of the motor pool. He took one look at Aiden's reduced shoulder, then at Raven, then at Connor's expression. What happened? Liam asked. Connor pointed at Raven. She performed an expert shoulder reduction using TCCC protocol, perfect technique, perfect terminology, and she's claiming she learned it at a civilian emergency clinic. Liam walked slowly toward Raven. His eyes went to her hands, her stance, the way she'd positioned herself relative to the patient. Every detail screamed military medical training. I've seen those scars on your arm, Liam said quietly. Fragmentation wounds, IED blast pattern, treated surgically in a combat zone, likely Kandahar province based on the repair technique. Around 2019 based on scar maturation. He paused. I was stationed there, field hospital. We treated task force operators, special missions units, the most classified personnel in theater. Raven's face had gone completely blank, emotionless, locked down. I have photos, Liam continued. Medical documentation, one case in particular, female operator, TFB designation, multiple fragmentation wounds, left forearm, right shoulder. The shoulder injury required extensive reconstruction, would have left significant scarring. He gestured to her right shoulder covered by her shirt. Want to show me that shoulder, Carter? Or should I call you by your actual designation? The crowd pressed closer. Phones appeared. Lily's camera was already recording. Mason, Charlotte, Ethan, and Iris had arrived, drawn by the commotion. Raven stood slowly, didn't answer, just looked at Liam with eyes that had seen too much. You're not going to admit it, are you? Liam said. Even with all the evidence, you're going to keep pretending. There's nothing to admit, Raven said quietly. I'm just someone trying to do a simple job. Okay, pause. Because what's about to happen in the next 60 seconds is the moment everything flips. All those little clues, they're converging, and someone in that room is about to recognize something they shouldn't. I'm talking jaw-dropping, career-ending recognition. You don't want to miss this. Trust me. Mason stepped forward, his cocky attitude replaced with genuine curiosity. Hold on. Let me get this straight. You're saying this cafeteria worker is actually... Was, Raven interrupted. Past tense. Whatever you think I was doesn't matter because I'm not that person anymore. You can't just stop being what you were, Iris said. Training like that doesn't disappear. No, but identities can. Raven's voice was hard now, tired. I left that life. I chose to leave, and I'd appreciate if everyone would let me continue living the life I chose instead of trying to drag me back into something I want no part of. That's not how this works. Colonel Walsh had arrived, drawn by the growing crowd. He pushed through to the center. If you're former military with the kind of training being suggested, your presence here under false pretenses represents a security concern. I need answers, now, full name, service history, unit designation. No, the single word dropped like a stone. Absolute refusal. Walsh's face reddened. That's insubordination. I'm not military. You can't give me orders. I'm a civilian employee who just helped treat an injured soldier because nobody else was available. If you want to fire me for that, fine. But I don't owe you my life story. The confrontation escalated. More personnel arrived. The crowd swelled to 70 people, phones everywhere capturing everything. Blake tried to intervene. Colonel, maybe this should be handled privately. This affects base security. It'll be handled here and now. Walsh turned back to Raven. Final chance. Explain yourself." Raven looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked around at all the faces, the cameras, the judgment, the curiosity, the pressure, and something inside her cracked. Not broke, cracked. A structural failure in the wall she'd built between past and present. "Fine," she said, voice flat and cold. "You want answers? Here's one. Some of us earned the right to walk away. Some of us paid for our discharge in blood and trauma and losses you can't begin to understand. And some of us deserve to be left alone to heal in whatever way we can find. That's all the explanation you're getting." She turned to leave. Mason grabbed her arm. "You don't get to walk away from—" Raven's response was instinctive, automatic, a decade and a half of training bypassing conscious thought. She trapped his hand-twisted applied pressure to the wrist joint. Mason found himself bent forward, off balance, completely controlled. She released him immediately, horror flashing across her face. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" But it was too late. Everyone had seen. The technique had been too perfect, too practiced, too absolutely professional. Charlotte breathed. "That was Krav Maga, military variant?" "Specifically," Blake said quietly from the back, "that was SEAL CQC technique, close quarters combat, the kind taught to special mission units." The silence that followed was absolute. 70 people, not a sound. Then Oliver arrived, jogging from the direction of the command building. He was carrying a tablet. His face was serious. "Colonel Walsh," Oliver called out, "I need to speak with you immediately. It's about Carter." Walsh turned. "What did you find?" "Sir, this should be private." "There's nothing private anymore. Everyone here already knows something's wrong. Report." Oliver hesitated, then activated his tablet. "Facial recognition match, 78% confidence. Subject Raven Carter. Match restricted military database. Status code KIA. Date August 2019. Unit designation Task Force Black." The words hit like explosive rounds. Task Force Black. The most classified Tier 1 unit in U.S. Special Operations. The unit that didn't officially exist. The unit whose operators were so deep in the black that even their families didn't know what they really did. And KIA, killed in action, dead. Officially deceased for 5 years. Except, she was standing right there, very much alive. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Holy cow!" Mason had backed away, holding his wrist. His face showed shock, confusion, and the beginning of comprehension. You were... Raven's expression had shut down completely. Total emotional lockdown. She stood perfectly still, saying nothing, revealing nothing, except the absolute confirmation of her silence. Walsh stepped forward slowly. "Show me your right shoulder, right now." "No. That's not a request. This is a security." "I said no." The standoff lasted 10 seconds. Then Walsh nodded to 2 MPs who'd arrived with Oliver. "Detain her. We'll continue this discussion in a secure facility." The MPs moved forward, reached for Raven's arms. And that's when everything went to absolute chaos. Because what none of them had considered, what none of them could have predicted, was that at that exact moment, conducting an unannounced inspection tour of the NATO training facility, a very senior officer was walking across the grounds. Rear Admiral James Fletcher, U.S. Navy, SEAL Command, 54 years old, 32 years of service. A man who'd seen more classified operations than most people could imagine. A man who'd personally coordinated with Task Force Black on Operation Vanguard Night in August 2019. Fletcher was walking past Range 3 heading toward the command building when he heard the commotion, heard the crowd, saw the MPs attempting to restrain someone, saw the woman's face, and froze completely. Just stopped walking, stopped breathing, stared, because he recognized her, despite the shorter hair, despite the weight loss. Despite 5 years of aging and trauma and change, he recognized her. Recognized the operator he'd been told died in a helicopter crash during extraction. Recognized the most decorated and most classified soldier he'd ever had the privilege of supporting. Recognized Death Angel. Fletcher's mouth opened. No sound came out. His brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. Reality had just broken fundamental rules about life and death and classified status reports. Then he did something that would become legendary in military circles, something that would be discussed and analyzed and debated for years. He came to attention, full military bearing, spine straight, shoulders back, heels together, and he saluted, sharp, precise, holding the position. 70 people turned to see what the Admiral was doing, saw him standing at attention, saluting a cafeteria worker. The confusion was palpable, absolute, complete, until Fletcher spoke. His voice cracked slightly. Task Force Black, call sign Death Angel, Operation Vanguard Night, Kandahar Province, August 15th, 2019. Raven's eyes closed, defeat written across her features, the last wall crumbling. Fletcher lowered his salute slowly. You held that ridge for 43 minutes, alone, after your entire team was killed. You held off 200 enemy combatants with a damaged weapon, 3 magazines, and a broken arm. You saved 6 operators' lives, called in fire support that prevented enemy advancement into the valley, refused evacuation until every friendly force was clear. His voice strengthened. You were recommended for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation was classified. You were declared KIA to protect operational security when you requested discharge after trauma treatment. The story was that you died in the extraction helicopter crash. But you didn't die. You survived, and you've been hiding ever since. The crowd was absolutely still. Shock didn't begin to describe the collective emotional state. Fletcher walked forward. The MPs backed away immediately. Nobody stopped an Admiral. Fletcher approached Raven until he was 3 feet away. Show them, he said quietly. They've already figured it out. Show them the truth. Raven's jaw clenched. Admiral, please. That's an order, Sergeant First Class. The rank designation hit like a hammer. Confirmation, validation, truth. Raven's hands moved to her collar, slowly, reluctantly. She unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of her shirt, pulled the fabric aside, exposing her right shoulder. The tattoo was exactly as described in classified files. Skull with angel wings. Latin phrase, mors ante dedecus, death before dishonor. Serial number TFB17. And below that, 8 tally marks, 8 lines, 8 teammates, 8 people who didn't come home. The visual was devastating, proof positive, screenshot worthy, undeniable. Fletcher's eyes watered. Your team was family, I knew them. Hernandez, Kim, Rodriguez, Jackson, Martinez, Owens, Chen, Davis. Good people, great operators. They died protecting a mission that saved hundreds of lives, and you survived to remember them. Raven's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't want to survive. I wanted to die with them. But you didn't. You lived. And then you chose to disappear because living with the memories was harder than dying would have been. Fletcher turned to address the crowd, volume rising. Listen to me, all of you. What you're seeing right now is classified above top secret. Task Force Black doesn't officially exist. Its operators don't officially exist. Sergeant First Class Raven Carter was officially declared killed in action 5 years ago. That status protected her identity and allowed her to leave service after severe psychological trauma from watching her entire team killed in front of her. He paused, making eye contact with Mason, then Charlotte, then Ethan, then Iris. This woman you've been mocking, this weak civilian you've been harassing, she has more combat experience than everyone here combined. 12 years of service, 47 classified missions, multiple decorations that will never be publicly acknowledged. She was, and I emphasize the past tense, one of the most effective special operations soldiers this country has ever produced. The weight of those words settled on the crowd like physical pressure, and she chose to walk away from that. Chose peace over recognition. Chose healing over glory. That deserves respect, not harassment. Fletcher looked at Walsh. Colonel, I'm ordering complete operational security on this situation. Nobody discusses what they heard here today. Nobody shares videos or photos. This goes into classified channels immediately. Clear. Walsh looked shell-shocked, but nodded. Yes, sir. Fletcher turned back to Raven. I'm sorry they didn't leave you alone. I'm sorry your cover was compromised. But since it is, we need to talk. There are developments regarding Operation Vanguard Night. New intelligence. We've identified the mole who betrayed your team. Raven's head snapped up. What? The person who sold your position to enemy forces. We know who it was, and they're still active, still in service, still potentially compromising operations. Fletcher's expression hardened. Your team deserves justice. You deserve answers. Will you help us? The question hung there, heavy, complicated, impossible. Around them, the crowd remained frozen, witnesses to something unprecedented, something they'd never be allowed to speak about but would never forget. Raven looked at her exposed tattoo, at the 8 marks representing 8 lives, at the permanent reminder of the worst night she'd ever experienced. Then she looked at Fletcher. I need time to think. Take what you need, but Raven Death Angel? Fletcher's voice softened. Some of us never really retire. We just wait for the right reason to come back. And with that, he stepped back, saluted again, and walked away toward the command building, leaving Raven standing in the center of 70 silent observers, leaving her exposed, revealed, known. The cafeteria worker was gone. The simple life was over. Death Angel had been found. And what came next would change everything. The silence after Fletcher's departure lasted exactly 7 seconds. Then the explosion of sound began. Gasps, exclamations, whispered curses, the scraping of boots as people shifted positions, phones buzzing as those who'd recorded started processing what they'd captured, the collective intake of breath from 70 people simultaneously realizing they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Mason stood 12 feet away, still holding his wrist, where Raven had controlled him moments before. His face had cycled through shocked disbelief and now settled on something resembling shame. The cocky SEAL who'd spent 3 weeks mocking a cafeteria worker had just learned he'd been harassing a Tier 1 operator with more combat experience than his entire team combined. I didn't know, he said, voice hollow. I swear I didn't. Of course you didn't know. Raven's voice was flat, empty. That was the entire point. I didn't want anyone to know. I wanted to be left alone, to do simple work, to exist without constantly being reminded of who I was and what I lost. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. But you couldn't let that happen, could you? Had to prove something. Had to establish dominance over someone you perceived as weak. Charlotte stepped forward, her British composure cracked. Ma'am, we made a terrible mistake. We should have what treated me with basic human respect that shouldn't require knowing my service history. Raven buttoned her shirt, covering the tattoo again. The fact that you only respect me now that you know I'm military says everything about your character. Ethan's face had gone pale. The things we said, the way we treated me like garbage, yes, you did. Raven's control was impressive. No shouting, no emotion, just cold facts. You saw someone doing honest work and decided that made them inferior, less than, deserving of mockery. That reflects on you, not me. Iris stood frozen, her aggressive feminism suddenly confronting its own contradiction. She'd spent weeks undermining another woman based on assumptions about weakness, never considering that true strength sometimes looked like choosing peace over conflict. I became what I hated, Iris whispered. I fought so hard to be taken seriously as a female operator, and then I turned around and did to you exactly what was done to me. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. That's not enough, but I'm sorry. Colonel Walsh had recovered from his shock enough to start issuing orders. Everyone not directly involved clear this area immediately. This is now a security situation. Lieutenant Hayes collect all phones and recording devices. Everything goes into classified channels. Oliver was already on his tablet typing rapidly. Sir, I'm pulling the complete file now, requesting higher clearance access. This is going to take a few minutes to decrypt. Do it. I want full confirmation before we proceed. Walsh looked at Raven. You're going to need to come to the command building. Admiral's orders supersede mine, but we still need proper documentation of this situation. Raven didn't respond, just stood there, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller now than she had even during the worst harassment. Being recognized hurt more than being invisible. Blake approached carefully. For what it's worth, I suspected something was off, but I never imagined this. Task Force Black. That's legendary. Legends aren't real, Raven said quietly. Just people doing terrible things in terrible places and trying to survive it. The Admiral said you held a ridge for 43 minutes alone. That's not just survival, that's watching everyone you care about die while you're too slow to save them. That's living with that failure every single day. That's the real story nobody puts in the legends. Her voice was steady, but the pain underneath was obvious. I held the ridge because I had no choice. I saved those 6 operators because they deserved to live. And then I spent 3 years in therapy trying to remember how to function like a normal human being. That's the part they leave out. Logan Pierce stepped forward, old veteran recognizing trauma in another soldier. You have survivor's guilt. Classic response to losing your team. It's not guilt if it's your fault. It's never just one person's fault when operations go wrong. You weren't there. You don't know. No, Logan agreed. But I know operators. I know how you think. I know you've replayed that night 10,000 times, finding every mistake, every decision that might have changed the outcome. And I know you're wrong. Because if you really had made fatal mistakes, you wouldn't have saved 6 operators and prevented enemy advancement. You did your job under impossible circumstances. The fact that you're still alive to feel guilty proves you did it right. Raven's jaw clenched. Pretty words don't change the score. 8 dead, 1 alive. That's not success. That's failure with a survivor. Connor had been listening, medic brain processing everything. The shoulder injury the Admiral mentioned. That's what left the scars, isn't it? IED fragmentation. RPG, close range, caught me while I was moving between positions. Shrapnel through the shoulder joint, compound fracture, severed artery. I treated it myself until the medevac arrived because there was nobody left to help me. Raven's voice was clinical, detached. Field surgery with my offhand while maintaining defensive fire. 4 hours. Then I passed out from blood loss. Woke up 3 days later in Germany. The crowd had thinned as Walsh's orders were enforced, but about 20 people remained senior officers, the main antagonist's key witnesses. Each one processing this information differently. Liam stepped closer to Raven medical professional to wounded soldier. The nightmares you mentioned waking up from. PTSD, complex PTSD, severe. The VA gave me every diagnosis in the book. Trauma response disorder, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, substance abuse problems for a while. She said it matter-of-factly. I was a mess, couldn't be around people, couldn't handle loud noises, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. The military gave me an honorable discharge under classified circumstances and declared me KIA to protect my identity. Fresh start. Clean slate. But you came back to a military base. Why? Exposure therapy. My therapist suggested gradual reintegration into military environments without the operational pressure. Proved to myself I could exist in this world without being consumed by it. Raven laughed bitterly. Obviously that didn't work out as planned. Oliver looked up from his tablet, expression serious. Kernel files decrypted. This is beyond anything I expected. Read it. Everyone here has already seen too much. Might as well give them the full picture. Oliver cleared his throat. Subject Carter Raven Lee, rank Sergeant First Class, Service U.S. Army, Unit Task Force Black JSOC, Special Missions Unit, years of service 12, total deployments 8, classified operations 47 confirmed. Decorations include Medal of Honor, classified Purple Heart, times 3 Bronze Star with Valor, times 5 Army Commendation, Medal times 7 Combat Infantry Badge, Special Forces, Tab, Ranger, Tab, Halo, Qualification, Scuba Qualification, Advanced Language Certifications in Arabic and Pashto. He paused, scrolling. Specialized Training, Advanced Marksmanship, Breaching Operations, Close Quarters. Combat Field, Medicine Intelligence, Gathering, Counterterrorism Operations. Mission Success Rate 94.3%. No disciplinary actions. Exemplary service record across all metrics. The statistics were staggering. Raven had been what every operator aspired to be. Oliver continued. Operation Vanguard Night, August 15, 2019, classified mission in Kandahar Province. 8-person team inserted for high-value target capture. Mission compromised intelligence later suggested internal betrayal. Enemy forces numbered approximately 200 heavily armed, prepared for engagement. Team ambushed during extraction phase. His voice dropped. Casualties 7 killed in action. Rodriguez died providing covering fire for team withdrawal. Kim and Hernandez died holding the primary position. Jackson Martinez, Owens Chen, and Davis died during the attempted fallback to secondary position. Only Sergeant Carter survived, suffering multiple injuries, including fragmentation, wounds compound fracture arterial damage, and severe trauma exposure. Carter maintained defensive position on elevated ridge for 43 minutes, preventing enemy advancement, called in AC-130 gunship support, coordinated extraction of 6 wounded operators from adjacent unit who were pinned down by the same enemy force, refused medical evacuation until all friendly forces were clear, passed out from blood loss during final extraction, medevac to Bagram, then Germany, then Walter Reed. Oliver looked up. Medical discharge granted after 18 months of treatment, PTSD diagnosis, declared KIA under classified circumstances at her request, cover story helicopter crash during training exercise, family notified of death, closed casket funeral conducted, full military honors. Except she didn't die, she just disappeared. The weight of that history settled on everyone present. This wasn't just an operator. This was a legend who'd walked away from glory because living with the memories was unbearable. Grace Sullivan had tears in her eyes. You're the one from the documentary, the classified one shown only at command level. They called it the Angel of Kandahar. They teach your tactics at Fort Benning now. Advanced Infantry School uses your operation as a case study in force multiplication and defensive positioning under overwhelming odds. Raven's expression was bitter. They turned the worst night of my life into a training video. Wonderful. They honored your sacrifice. They commodified my trauma. There's a difference. And speaking of specialized knowledge, the legal framework around classified military operations is incredibly complex. Military law attorneys who handle cases involving declassified personnel or identity protection can charge upwards of $500 per hour. These aren't general practice lawyers. They're experts in national security law, FOIA requests, and navigating the intersection between civilian and military legal systems. Some even offer online courses for veterans transitioning to civilian life who need to understand their rights regarding classified service records. It's a specialized field that most people never even know exists. Walsh had been listening to everything his earlier dismissiveness replaced with something resembling respect mixed with discomfort. Sergeant Carter, don't call me that. I'm not sergeant anymore. I'm just Raven, civilian, former operator, trying to live quietly. That's no longer possible. Your identity has been compromised. Your cover is blown. We need to discuss your status and security going forward. My status is that I'm done. My security is that I walk away from this base and never come back. Raven looked around at all the watching faces. I've lost my anonymity, fine. But I don't owe any of you anything beyond what's already been revealed. I did my time, paid my dues, earned the right to leave. So that's what I'm doing. Leaving. She started walking toward the parking area. Wait. The voice belonged to Captain Ivy Reynolds. You said 8 tally marks on your tattoo. 8 teammates. But the report says 7 KIA. What's the 8th mark for? Raven stopped but didn't turn around. The 8th mark is for who I used to be, the person who believed in the mission, who thought we were making a difference, who trusted the intelligence that sent us into that valley. She died that night too. Just took her body a few years longer to figure it out. She walked away, leaving 70 people standing in stunned silence. But she didn't get far. Fletcher intercepted her in the parking lot, his staff car blocking her vehicle. 2 Marines stood nearby, security detail, not a threat, but definitely a presence. We're not done talking, Fletcher said firmly. I am. Raven, listen to me. I knew your team. I coordinated with them on 6 different operations before Vanguard Night. Rodriguez saved my life in Fallujah back in '06. Jackson was at my wedding. These weren't just operators to me. They were friends. That made Raven pause, turn around slowly. Then you understand why I can't go back to that world. I understand why you don't want to, but I'm telling you there's unfinished business, the mole who betrayed your team. We've identified him. He's a JSOC liaison officer. He's been selling operational intelligence to enemy forces for 6 years. Your team wasn't his first betrayal, and if we don't stop him, they won't be his last. Raven's hands clenched into fists. Who is it? That's classified, but I can tell you that he's still active. Still trusted, still sending soldiers into compromised operations. Fletcher stepped closer. "I'm not asking you to return to active duty. I'm asking you to help us build the case that stops him. Your testimony, your knowledge of what happened that night. You're the only survivor, the only witness, the only one who can connect the dots between what you experienced and what we've learned since. Testimony means going public, means losing what little privacy I have left. Testimony means justice for 8 dead operators, means preventing future betrayals, means your team didn't die for nothing." The emotional manipulation was obvious, but it was also effective, because Fletcher was right. Rodriguez Kim, Hernandez Jackson, Martinez, Owens, Chen Davis, they deserve justice. They deserve someone to care that they'd been betrayed. "I need to think about it," Raven said finally. "I need time. You have 48 hours. After that, we move forward without you. But Raven, those 8 marks on your shoulder, they're not a burden. They're a responsibility. Honor them by finishing what they started." Fletcher left. His Marines followed. Raven stood alone in the parking lot, feeling the weight of the past pressing down like a physical force. She drove back to her small apartment on the civilian side of base housing, sat in her car for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, then went inside, locked the door, and allowed herself to break down properly. Crying, shaking, all the emotions she'd been suppressing for hours finally erupting. Grief for her exposed identity, anger at the people who'd forced the revelation, pain from memories she'd been trying to bury, fear about what came next. It took an hour before she could breathe normally again. So that's the story of how a cafeteria worker became a legend at NATO. But here's the thing, there's more, because that file the Admiral saw, it contained details I couldn't share in this video. Details about where Raven is now and what happened to the people who put her team in that ambush. Want that story? It's coming next. The consequences began immediately. Within 6 hours, everything had changed. Mason received formal orders to report to his commanding officer. The meeting was brief and devastating. Written reprimand in his permanent file. Removed from training leadership position. Mandatory harassment prevention training. Formal apology required written and verbal to be delivered to Raven Carter within 48 hours. His SEAL teammates didn't hide their disappointment. "You harassed a Medal of Honor recipient," his squad leader said flatly. "You made our entire unit look bad. You embarrassed the teams. That's not how we operate. You're benched until you prove you've learned something." Charlotte's situation was similar, called before her SAS command structure. British military politeness couldn't hide the severity of the reprimand. Removed from intelligence assessment duties, transferred to administrative role pending review. Her career trajectory previously on track for promotion to major had hit a wall. "You displayed appalling judgment," her superior officer stated coldly. "You allowed personal biases to override professional conduct. The woman you mocked has more operational experience than you'll achieve in 20 years. That kind of failure to recognize excellence reflects poorly on your analytical capabilities. Consider your advancement prospects significantly delayed." Ethan faced his Force Recon commander, a grizzled colonel who didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Reassignment effective immediately. You're going to a training platoon, teaching recruits. Maybe there you'll learn the difference between confidence and arrogance. You harassed a Tier 1 operator, someone who's forgotten more about combat than you've learned. That shows fundamental lack of judgment. Fix yourself or find another career." Iris's confrontation with her Special Forces command was perhaps the most pointed. Her female battalion commander didn't hide her disappointment. "You spent years fighting to be taken seriously as a female operator, years proving that women belong in Special Forces, and then you turned around and degraded another woman based on superficial assessments. You became exactly what we've been fighting against. Formal probation. 6 months. One more incident and you're done. Use that time to figure out who you want to be." But the consequences extended beyond the main antagonists. Colonel Walsh found himself in a video conference with NATO, Command, and Pentagon representatives. The questions were pointed. How did a classified operator work on your facility for 6 months without detection? What security protocols failed? Who authorized her employment? Why wasn't her background more thoroughly vetted? The employment was legitimate, Walsh explained. Her civilian identity was created by JSOC, as part of her discharge process. It passed all standard background checks because it was meant to pass. The system worked as designed. What failed was the culture that allowed harassment to escalate to the point where her cover was compromised by defensive necessity. Explain. Walsh took a breath. 4 operators, 3 from allied nations, systematically harassed a civilian employee for 3 weeks. Multiple witnesses, multiple incidents. The harassment escalated until she was forced into situations that revealed her training. Had our personnel treated her with basic professional respect, her identity would have remained secure. The silence on the other end was heavy. Institute immediate facility-wide respect and conduct training. Submit a complete report within 72 hours. And Colonel, this reflects poorly on your leadership. Consider this a final warning. The institutional impacts rippled outward. NATO revised contractor background check procedures. New protocols for protecting veterans with classified service histories. Improved security measures for identifying personnel with enhanced threat profiles. The Department of Defense initiated a review of veteran transition support, particularly for special operations personnel with severe PTSD. How many others were out there trying to rebuild civilian lives while carrying classified trauma? How many needed better support systems? Base culture shifted almost overnight. The mess hall that had been the site of Raven's initial humiliation became a place of quiet respect. Soldiers who'd witnessed the revelation spread the story carefully quietly within security guidelines. The cafeteria worker who'd been mocked became the operator who'd survived the impossible. When Raven returned to work 3 days later, because despite everything she still needed the paycheck, the atmosphere was completely different. Soldiers lined up at her station with respectful nods. Some offered quiet thanks for her service. Others just made eye contact and smiled with genuine warmth. Connor approached during a quiet moment. I wanted to apologize. I should have noticed you were struggling, should have defended you more actively. You were kind when others weren't. That matters. I also wanted to ask if you'd consider mentoring me. Combat medicine. You performed an expert shoulder reduction under pressure. That level of skill doesn't come from books. I'd like to learn from you. Raven considered. Mentoring meant connection. Connection meant vulnerability. But it also meant passing knowledge to someone who might use it to save lives. Her team would have wanted that. 1 session per week, medical scenarios only, and we never discuss operations. Deal. Deal. Connor's smile was genuine. Thank you. Grace Sullivan appeared next. I've been inspired by your story. I've requested assessment for special operations training. They told me it was unlikely I'd qualify. But if you can do what you did, then maybe I can do this. You showed me what's possible. Special operations is brutal, physically and mentally. Don't romanticize it. I'm not. I'm looking at it realistically. And realistically, I think I have what it takes. But I needed to see someone who'd walked the path first. Grace's eyes were determined. You're that example, whether you wanted to be or not. Logan Pierce offered something different, understanding from another veteran who'd survived when others hadn't. We have a group, vets with combat experience. Meets Thursday nights off base, informal, just talking, sharing experiences. You'd be welcome. I don't do groups. Neither did I, for 10 years. Then I realized isolation was killing me slower than combat ever could. Just think about it. Liam provided medical perspective. Your scars tell a story of survival, not just physical survival, but the will to keep living when dying would have been easier. That's rare. That's valuable. Don't waste it by hiding forever. Even Blake offered wisdom. I've commanded soldiers for 20 years. I've seen a lot of leaders. What makes someone truly exceptional isn't just skill or courage. It's the willingness to be vulnerable, to admit they're human. You did that today. You let people see your pain. That takes more strength than holding a ridge ever could. But perhaps the most significant consequence came from an unexpected source. Major Martha Crawford, the senior female officer who'd initially dismissed Raven, requested a private meeting. They sat in a quiet corner of the nearly empty mess hall after evening service. I owe you an apology, Martha began. I saw you as just another civilian contractor, didn't bother to look deeper, didn't consider that there might be more to your story. That failure of perception reflects my own biases and limitations. You weren't the only one. No, but I should have been better. I'm senior enough to know better. Old enough to have learned that people contain depths we can't see on the surface. Martha paused. I'm also chairing a committee on women in combat roles, policy recommendations for expanding opportunities. I'd like your input, anonymous if you prefer, but your experience, particularly as someone who succeeded at the highest levels and then chose to walk away, that perspective is invaluable. Raven was quiet for a long moment. Why did I walk away? That's what you really want to know. Yes, because success at those levels requires sacrificing parts of yourself. Your peace, your mental health, your ability to connect with normal life. I gave 12 years and came away with PTSD, nightmares, trust issues, and 8 dead friends. That's the cost. And I decided I'd paid enough. Raven met Martha's eyes. Before you encourage women to pursue special operations, make sure they understand the full price. Not just the physical challenges, the psychological toll, the cost to their humanity. That's honest. That's necessary. The military sells glory and honor and patriotism. All true. But they don't sell the aftermath, the years of therapy, the inability to be around crowds, the hypervigilance that never turns off, the relationships that fail because you can't explain what you've experienced. That's the truth nobody talks about. Martha nodded slowly. I'll include that perspective. Thank you. The weeks that followed brought gradual normalization. Raven continued working. Though her duties expanded to include supply chain consultation, her expertise too valuable to waste on just cafeteria work. She maintained professional distance but allowed small connections. Weekly medical training with Connor. Occasional tactical supply discussions with Blake. One Thursday night appearance at Logan's veteran group, which became 2, then regular attendance. The nightmares didn't stop. The PTSD didn't disappear. But the isolation lessened. The crushing weight of carrying her story alone eased slightly. Fletcher returned after 30 days with updated information. The investigation into the JSOC mole had progressed. Evidence was building. But they needed Raven's testimony to complete the case. Needed her to describe exactly what happened the night of Operation Vanguard night. Needed her to connect intelligence patterns to operational outcomes. I've thought about it, Raven told him. About what you said. About responsibility. And I'll testify, but not in court, not publicly. Closed hearing, classified setting, only essential personnel. We can arrange that. And after the case is complete, you leave me alone. No recruitment attempts, no appeals to come back. No, the team needs you speeches. I'm done. Permanently, that's the deal. Fletcher considered. That's acceptable. When can you start? Give me 2 weeks to prepare, to get my head right. Then I'll tell you everything. That's all I'm asking. 2 weeks later, Raven sat in a secure facility with lawyers, investigators, and command staff. She described Operation Vanguard night in clinical detail, the intelligence briefing, the insertion, the approach to the target compound, the sudden ambush, the overwhelming enemy numbers, the desperate defense, the radio calls, the deaths, each teammate falling, the 43 minutes alone, the pain, the fear, the certainty that she would die. She described the intelligence failures that suggested betrayal, the enemy's detailed knowledge of their approach route, the pre-positioned forces, the coordinated timing, details that could only have come from someone with access to the operational brief. Her testimony took 6 hours. When it was done, she was exhausted but also lighter. The story had been carried alone for 5 years. Now others knew. Others could help carry the weight. Thank you, the lead investigator said. This information is crucial. With your testimony, we can move forward. Make it count, Raven replied. Make sure my team didn't die for nothing. We will. 3 months later, a JSOC liaison officer was quietly arrested, charged under Military Justice Code with espionage, treason, and the deaths of 43 American soldiers across multiple compromised operations. The trial was classified. The verdict guilty. The sentence life imprisonment without parole at Fort Leavenworth, maximum security facility. Justice served, not publicly celebrated, but served nonetheless. Fletcher called Raven personally. It's done. The mole is convicted. Your team has justice. Thank you for seeing it through. Thank you for having the courage to come forward. I know what it cost you. He paused. And I'm keeping my promise. No recruitment, no appeals. You've done your part. Go live your life. I intend to. 6 months after the revelation, Raven received an unexpected visitor at her apartment. Iris Bennett carrying coffee and wearing civilian clothes. "Can I come in?" Iris asked. Raven hesitated, then opened the door wider. They sat at the small kitchen table. Awkward silence for a moment. Then Iris spoke. "I've spent 6 months thinking about what I did, about what kind of person I'd become, and I realized I hated that person. So I've been working on changing." She took a breath. "I started therapy, dealing with my own insecurities and biases, trying to understand why I felt threatened by you, why I needed to tear down another woman to feel better about myself. That takes courage to admit. I learned it from you, watching you face your demons publicly. If you could do that, I could at least face mine privately." Iris looked down at her coffee. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to be better, trying to be the kind of operator, the kind of person who lifts others up instead of tearing them down." Raven was quiet for a long moment. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give or withhold. You wronged yourself as much as you wronged me. The question is whether you can forgive yourself and move forward. I'm working on it. Then keep working. That's all anyone can do." Iris nodded, left the coffee and departed. Small gesture, but meaningful. Life settled into a new rhythm. Raven worked, trained Connor once a week, attended Logan's group on Thursdays, participated in Martha's committee via anonymous written submissions, gradually built a life that included both her past and her future. The nightmares lessened, not gone, but less frequent, less intense. Therapy helped, connection helped, purpose helped. She was healing, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. And then one evening, 8 months after the revelation, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her look. The voicemail notification appeared. She listened. Fletcher's voice. "Raven, I know I promised to leave you alone, and I'm keeping that promise. But something's come up. New intelligence, related to Operation Vanguard Night. There's more to the story than we knew. More players involved. The mole wasn't working alone. Call me when you can, but only if you want to. No pressure, no obligation, just, there's more." Raven stared at her phone for a long time, then deleted the message without calling back. She was done, had paid her dues, earned her peace. But that evening she found herself pulling out an old box from her closet. The box she'd hidden away 8 years ago. Inside photos of her team, unit patches, challenge coins, the physical remnants of a life she'd tried to leave behind. She looked at Rodriguez's photo, Kim's smile, Hernandez's terrible jokes captured in a candid shot, Jackson Martinez, Owens Chen Davis, all of them young, all of them committed, all of them dead. "I miss you guys," she whispered to the photos. "Every day, but I can't keep fighting your battles forever. I hope you understand." She put the box away, went to bed, tried to sleep. But Fletcher's words echoed, "There's more to the story, always more, always another mission, another threat, another reason to come back." The next morning, Raven saw something that made her blood run cold. Sitting in the parking lot across from her apartment, a black sedan, tinted windows, government plates, 2 figures inside barely visible. She watched them for 5 minutes. They didn't move, just observed. She got in her car and drove to work. The sedan followed, maintaining distance, professional surveillance. At work, she mentioned it to Blake. He made some calls, came back with interesting information. The vehicle is registered to a DoD contractor, security services. But when I asked which contract, I got transferred 3 times and told the information was classified. Someone's watching me. Someone's protecting you. There's a difference. Or both. That evening, the sedan was still there. Raven approached it directly, tapping on the driver's window. It lowered 2 inches. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Negative, ma'am. Just performing security observations." "On whose authority?" "Can't disclose that, ma'am." "Am I in danger?" Pause. "Potentially. But you're covered. We're here to ensure no threats materialize." The window closed. End of conversation. Raven went inside, locked her door, and called Fletcher. "There's a surveillance team on me. Government. Who authorized that?" Fletcher's voice was careful. After the mole's conviction, we discovered he'd passed your identity to several hostile intelligence services, foreign actors who might be interested in a Tier 1 operator. The surveillance is protective, making sure nobody takes action against you. So I'm a target. You're potentially a target. We're mitigating that risk. By watching me constantly, by ensuring your safety, there's a difference. When does it end? When we're certain the threat has passed. Could be months, could be years. Raven hung up without responding, sat in her quiet apartment, looked at the walls that had felt safe until today. She pulled out her laptop, opened an encrypted email account she hadn't accessed in years, found the message Fletcher had sent following his voicemail, the classified file attached. She stared at the attachment for 10 minutes, then opened it. The file contained new intelligence. The mole had been working for a larger network, foreign intelligence, organized crime, rogue military contractors, a web of corruption far deeper than anyone had realized. And Operation Vanguard Night hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been part of a larger operation to eliminate witnesses to weapons smuggling operations in Kandahar province. Her team had been targeted, specifically, deliberately, because they'd seen something they shouldn't have on a previous mission. The file included names, faces, organizations, a network that was still active, still operating, still profiting from chaos. And at the bottom of the file, a note from Fletcher. Your team stumbled onto something bigger than anyone knew. They died to protect this information. The question is, do we finish what they started? Raven closed the laptop, stood, looked at herself in the mirror. She saw the woman she'd become, quiet, peaceful, healing. But underneath, she still saw Death Angel, warrior, operator, someone who finished missions. Her phone rang. Fletcher again. This time she answered. I read the file, she said. And I'm not coming back. I'm done with operations, done with the life. Understood. But I'll consult. Intelligence analysis, pattern recognition, identifying targets and connections. From here, remotely, no field work, no active operations. That's acceptable. When can you start? Raven looked out her window at the black sedan, at the watchers protecting her, at the life that would never quite be normal again. Send me everything you have. I'll review it tonight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This doesn't mean I'm back. It just means I'm helping. There's a difference. I understand. After hanging up, Raven made coffee. Strong, black. The way she'd drunk it in the field. Opened her laptop again, started reviewing files. Outside, the black sedan remained. Inside, one operative spoke into a radio. Death Angel is active again. Confirm visual. Do we maintain position? The response crackled back, affirmative. Maintain observation. She's under protection status. Nobody touches her. Copy that. The sedan settled in for a long watch. Inside her apartment, Raven worked through the night, analyzing data, finding patterns, connecting dots, using skills she'd thought she'd left behind. By dawn, she had a preliminary analysis, 3 high-value targets, 2 network nodes, 1 critical vulnerability in their operational security. She sent the analysis to Fletcher with a note. This is what I see, but remember, I'm not coming back. Some angels don't return to heaven. They just wait in the shadows watching over those who still fight. She closed the laptop, looked at the 8 tally marks visible on her shoulder in the mirror's reflection. This is for you, she whispered. All of you. We're going to finish what you started, not because I want to, but because you deserve it. The sun rose over the NATO facility. A new day beginning, a new chapter starting. Raven Carter was still a cafeteria worker, still healing, still building a quiet life. But she was also still Death Angel, still protecting, still serving, just in different ways now. Some warriors retire, some disappear, some die, and some just wait, patient, watchful, ready. Because the mission never really ends, it just changes form. And Death Angel was patient. She'd waited 5 years already. She could wait as long as necessary. The real question wasn't whether she'd return to action. The question was, when the moment came, when innocent lives hung in the balance and nobody else could do what needed doing, would she answer the call? The file on her laptop held that answer, encrypted, waiting. A door she could choose to open or leave closed. She looked at the black sedan outside, at the protectors who'd become shadows in her life, at the complicated future unfolding. Then she went to work, served breakfast, smiled at soldiers, lived her quiet life. But in the evening she returned to the file, continued analyzing, kept working. Because some questions don't have simple answers, some missions don't have clean endings, some angels never quite stop fighting. They just change tactics, adapt, evolve, and wait for the right moment to strike.